Okay, can I welcome you to the Scrutiny Performance Committee? Can I start off with apologies for absence? I've had apologies from Victoria Holland and Wendy Lewis. I don't know if Wendy's managed to join. She said she might, so clearly not. So that, have we got any other apologies at all? No? Okay, right, I'm just going to do something new now. For the benefits of those who are online, I'm going to ask the people in the room to introduce themselves so that people know who's in the room. So I'm going to start off with Bridge and work that way around.
Bridge Madahar Scrutiny Team.
Right. I'm Peter Black, I'm the chair.
Good afternoon, Samantha Woon, Democratic Services.
Councillor Adam Davis for Fluker Ward.
Debbie Smith, Deputy Chief Legal Officer.
Councillor Andrew Stevens, Cabinet Member for Environment and Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, I'm Matt Bowyer, Group Leader for Traffic and Network Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, Chloe Lewis, Team Leader for Transport Strategy and Monitoring.
Good afternoon, Jack Palmer, Active Travel Officer.
And finally, Mark Wade, Director of Place.
That's great, thank you for that. So hopefully everyone knows now who's in the room and people can see who's online as well. Right, item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Does anybody have any disclosures they wish to make at this stage? No? Officers, no? Oh, okay. Right, item 3, prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. And then we go on to the minutes of the last meeting, which is item 4. So this is on page 1, this is a correct record. Page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. I think everyone's happy that's a correct record. Excellent, thank you. Public question time. I'm not aware of any public questions having been received. So in that case, we're going to go on to the scrutiny of Cabinet Member portfolio responsibilities, which is active travel. And can I welcome Councillor Andrew Stevens and the various officers who have just introduced themselves. Andrew, would you like to make some opening remarks?
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into too much detail as I'm sure everyone's read the report and I don't want to take too much of your time as I know members have several questions in mind. But I would like to touch on a couple of points, if I may. I'll then hand over to Jack and the team to give you some more detail. So as the committee know, we have a very ambitious as an authority. We are very ambitious as an authority in our aim to expand our active travel network across the city and county. We've had outstanding. We have an outstanding and dedicated active travel team who have secured us high levels of Welsh Government capital funding, thankfully several of whom are here with me today. This grant fund has enabled us to create a network that covers over 140 kilometres, or if you're like me and still working miles and acres, that's over 85 miles. Our extensive active travel network and the significant amount of funding secured to implement is something that we are proud of. It's certainly something I am proud of, and as we have many outstanding routes right across the city. It's crucial that we do press on with our active travel ambitions. As you all know, we all signed a climate declaration of climate emergency, and this is a key component of that. And as more awareness is gained about the environmental impacts that cars and traffic have on our environment and climate, and if we are serious about getting people out of their cars, using alternative modes of transport, then we must put a safe and reliable network in place that people can use. There's also a huge number of health and well-being benefits that come along with active travel, even if it's just on regular short journeys, be it cycling or walking. While we're all aware that it can cause disruption and concern in some areas, but it's all part of a bigger picture. So I just want to thank our active travel team for pulling together the report for you today, and for Jack, Chloe, Dave and Matt and Mark for coming along. So I'll now hand over to Jack to go through perhaps the report in some more detail, if that's okay with you, Jack.
That's fine, carry on, Jack.
Thank you, Chair. So what I'll do is just give a brief overview of what's in the report, just for anybody listening who hasn't read it yet. Feel free to hurry me along or cut me off if it's taking a bit too long. So just as a bit of background, active travel, it's a term used to describe purposeful journeys through active means, which can include walking, cycling and wheeling. Breaking down wheeling can obviously be use of mobility aids such as a wheelchair, but also push scooters, for example. Purposeful journeys count as going to a destination such as education, school, shops, or a combination of the rest with public transport. This is something that obviously is encouraged not just by Welsh Government, by the Council to improve the environment, to encourage healthy lives, and also to help meet our carbon reduction goals. It's also held within the Welsh Government's Wales Transport Strategy from 2021. They have a quite handy transport hierarchy, which shows walking and cycling extra travel at the top of that, working downwards through public transport all the way to the private vehicle. As Councillor Stevens has mentioned, Swansea Council's got a ambitious programme of a pipeline of projects which are constantly being developed or delivered, and we have a network of just over 140 kilometres, 7 of which was added or improved over the last year. And the Scrutiny Committee is obviously asked to have an overview of some of the backgrounds to active travel in Wales and Swansea, and some of Swansea's activities as well. So to kind of start us up with this, the Active Travel Wales Act 2013 introduces a legislative requirement to plan for and promote routes for walking and cycling for everyday journeys in Wales. The purpose of this is to enable more people to travel actively, meaning more people can enjoy the health, environmental, and economic benefits of active travel, but also to increase levels of active travel. Yeah, it contributes to the Wales Wellbeing Goals and the Future Generations Act. The provisions of the Act really put in place the conditions which allow more people to leave the car at home if they can for a journey, for everyday journeys. And the Act also sets out some of the definitions and structures for how active travel can be promoted. So, for example, the definition of an active travel route is, as mentioned, for purposeful journeys. So it does exclude those for purely recreational routes, such as off-road circuits or mountain bike trails. But it also includes routes used predominantly for walking and cycling for leisure purposes. So it doesn't go against each other. It's more that it's primarily for active travel, purposeful journeys. From the Active Travel Act, the Welsh Government has produced documents such as the Active Travel Act Guidance. This is a pretty beefy document that's split into 2 parts. The first part is a summary of the policy landscape and advice for professionals, councils, any organisations that are practitioners of active travel or seeking to promote it. The second part of that guidance is really detailed technical guidance on how to design and implement active travel infrastructure. And that you can view on Appendix A of this report. Something else which comes from the active travel guidance is the requirement to produce maps of walking and cycling networks. Some people might be familiar with the older integrated network maps, which were around from 2017. From the ATAG guidance, we needed to produce an active travel network map, which replaces the INN and produces a map showing existing and potential future routes for walking and cycling in the county area. This was developed over 2021 with residents, members of the council and other stakeholders, and this was subjected to a 12-week public consultation and some preliminary engagements as well, and was widely promoted and engaged with. Having this active travel network map not only was the result of residents and stakeholders mapping potential future routes, but also existing issues and opportunities for improving the network. And it gives us a strategic document with which to apply for funding to develop and improve future routes. So it's a really important document, and that can be found on the council's web pages. And I believe we've also got a PDF version which we developed attached to this report, again as Appendix C. The method or the function for accessing funding to develop and improve the network then is the Active Travel Fund. This is a capital grant fund that's established by the Welsh Government, and it exists for local authorities to bid for competitively for funds to improve and expand their active travel networks and supporting infrastructure as well. So this is something which is applied for on an annual basis through competitive grant bids. And Swansea has a pretty good record of securing funding for this. There's, I think, a graph showing funding received over the last 5 years in the appendix as well. So the implementation of this is Swansea's Active Travel Programme, The ATF fund is split into a mix of main package bids, which are schemes for delivery, construction, and core allocation funding, which is attributed to every council and is split into funds for developing future schemes, a pipeline, and minor works for improvements and infrastructure. Along with that, obviously, there's the implementation of that. You have community benefits, which we can touch on a bit later, I believe, which are benefits for communities and schools in the areas that schemes have been delivered. There's also oversight by Transport for Wales, which is this branch of Welsh Government which manages and facilitates the fund and which we report to. In terms of consultation and engagement, it was something touched on by this committee back in February 2021 in relation to a couple of schemes. I think the cabinet member of the time took on board some of these suggestions and the conversations had at that meeting, and you can see some of the correspondence in the appendix. The emphasis on that since has been to strengthen and expand the engagement that we do, not just in the big picture stuff like the active travel network map, but also in how we develop and produce and deliver schemes as well, which you can kind of follow in the points under point 7. We also do monitoring evaluation. This is something that we need to do for our reporting to Welsh Government, but it also helps us with business case development and being able to identify any issues that are raised to us from the public or stakeholders. So we've got infrastructure in place for that. We also have a survey team, and this forms how we develop future schemes, but also how we plan for active travel as well. There's a summary there which is helpful for everything I've just gone through. We're happy to take any questions. I realise I've probably spoken for long enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, the first question is Wendy Fitzgerald on consultation. Put your microphone on, Wendy. Almost. There you go.
Is it on now?
It's on now, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what is wrong with it. Yes, thank you very much for that presentation, briefly summarising where we are. Well, my question really is on, first question is on the consultation, and I just wondered how you think that things have changed when comparing the council's approach to the consultation that took place in 2017 and comparing it with 2021. You know, I'm looking at a letter here where I was told that in relation to 2017, we do not have a record, this is from the council, of direct correspondence being sent specifically to councillors, community councils or individual residents. So in other words, the communication in 2017 in terms of consultation seemed to be distinctly lacking. So how do you think it has improved in terms of the consultation that took place in 2021?
Andrew, do you want to start with that or Jack?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I'll start briefly and I'll pass over to Jack on the consultation. So my understanding is that we've always carried out consultation in line with government guidelines, but as public interest and awareness of these schemes has increased, we've therefore widened our consultation to capture any interested parties. But Jack, I don't know if you want to elaborate more on the network map. And
absolutely, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Agreed, the consultation in 2017 for the integrated network map, the way that was delivered was for as wide an audience as possible and to engage as many people as possible. So it was promoted over the press release. There were community drop-in events, consultations at primary and secondary schools, and also paper copies of documents and an online survey which was hosted for 12 weeks. But I appreciate your point that, which I think was discussed a couple of years ago in this committee, that engagement, particularly with councillors as well, could have been more targeted. So that's something which we took on board for the active travel network map consultations, which were done over 2021. For that, there was a preliminary engagement using Commonplace, which was an online mapping tool where residents were able to drop pins on areas showing where they thought issues were or possible improvements or things they liked. That was really useful for identifying areas which would inform the future routes which went into the draft active travel network map. But even before that, there was a lot of preliminary engagement with not just councillors to make them aware that there was the opportunity to give feedback, but also to ask for it to be promoted, but also with other stakeholders as well. There was a lot of work with schools, interest groups, and other bodies that had an interest in active travel. The main consultation on the draft active travel network map itself was widely promoted, and that was the subject again of press releases, several drop-ins, and other promotion as well, such as radio and social media as well. So we had really good responses for both of those kind of rounds of engagement. The first round, I actually haven't got the numbers in front of me, but they're on the report, which is, yeah, the first engagement had over 3,700 visitors with 3,210 contributions made by 785 respondents. The second round of consultation, alongside stakeholder engagement and letters and detailed feedback given by organisations, also had 346 responses on the draft ATNM as well. So we feel that this was a really good improvement on not just engagement in detail, but also awareness from the initial consultation. And it's something that I think we can maybe get a little bit focused on the INM and the ATNM, important though they are, but also it's important to note that once schemes enter into active travel funding, then scheme specific consultation needs to take place. And that's something else that I believe that we've been a lot stronger on. There's been good engagement for schemes where we're developing proposals, but also the council set up an active travel stakeholder group of interested groups in active travel, which has really helped to discuss ideas, but also to help spread information out into communities in Swansea. And in fairness, I think even the recruitment of my position was something that took place at the end of 2021 going into 2022. So I think it was a recognition of the importance of this area of work and the amount of time and resource needed to help make sure that people engage with these schemes.
Okay, Wendy.
Yes, thank you for that. All I will say is, yes, certainly 2021 was an improvement in the way the consultation was managed. However, when one participates in the consultation, you tend to feel that your view will be reflected. But I think it's fair to say that no matter what opposition there was to an active travel route, it made not the slightest bit of difference. So in that sense, the consultation seemed a little bit pointless because it was going to go ahead even if all the community was totally opposed to it. So I'll leave it at that point, Chair.
Do you want to move on to your next question, Wendy, on safety and comfort?
Right, yes. The guidance, active travel guidance, stresses that active travel routes need to be safe and comfortable. Now, there have been big concerns raised about males alongside busy carriageways. The one in my ward, carriageways narrowed, very wide active travel route, etc., etc. And the worry is the increasing risk of collision between road users, cyclists and pedestrians. And indeed, last week we unfortunately had a cyclist using the active travel route, which is pretty rare, went over the bonnet of a car. We have lorries unable to pass each other, mounting the active travel route. Now, these are concerns, and the fear is that we are going to have a more serious accident at some point. So what is the council doing to monitor the situations on the active travel routes, such as males, such as in my ward? In my ward, it's a very, very busy road with very, very big lorries. So, what is the council doing to monitor the accident potential, etc.? Thank you.
Jack, whoever.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. I'll just come back on the point on narrowing the carriageways, and I might pass over to Matt regarding road safety as well. Just in terms of the design of routes, obviously they need to be done on a scheme by scheme basis. No part of Swansea is the same as another. In instances where there's not enough width, including footway, carriageway, and any other available space to deliver infrastructure and keep the roads as they are, then the next step is to reallocate road space to enable room, as you say, to make it safe and comfortable and wider for people who are path users on the side of the carriageway. Narrowing the lanes is always done in line with design guidance for highways, so sufficient room is left for larger vehicles to pass each other, even if it feels a bit closer than they may have before. This enables space to be created for people walking and cycling to have enough room to get around one another and actually make it safer for them. And I appreciate that some cyclists may be on the road, but having narrower roads does slow down traffic, which makes it safer for people who are travelling along roads, but it also makes it safer for pedestrians or cyclists who are going to cross roads as well. I think I'll pass over to Matt then regarding just road safety more general and monitoring.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, the council's got various statutory obligations related to road safety, taking steps to reduce and prevent accidents on the highway. We receive regular updates of police reported accidents, so we can monitor what's going on the network. Mayors Road's a particularly interesting case because Mayors Road had quite a poor accident record pre-scheme. I mean, I think it's of the order of about 40 reportable accidents in the 10 years before the cycle path was implemented, for 4 a year on average. And whilst it is still quite new to draw any real conclusions from it, I believe there's been one accident in the 2 years since it was implemented, and that one reportable accident was on a side road and involved a road worker, which is why it was reported, because it was somebody who was at work at the time. I'm not aware of the accident that Councillor Fitzgerald's referencing on Goss Island Road. We have put some calls into the police to see if we can get any more information on it, but we haven't had anything through yet.
So if you do have issues with a particular route, do you have the resources to then modify that route if need be to try to correct that?
Thanks, Jay. Yes, what generally happens then is we would monitor the performance of certain routes, and then that would trigger the need for bids for things like road safety grant and that kind of thing in order to implement interventions, to put it right.
Okay, thank you. Gwen, do you want to go on to community benefits, or unless you've got a follow-up question on that one?
Yes, okay, thank you. Yes, yes, I did read in the report that there were community benefits available. It listed such things as new seating, place making features, and greenery. So I'm just wondering where I could see examples of these benefits being delivered. I can't say I've noticed any in my ward, but perhaps I haven't looked close enough. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, there's maybe some different parts that kind of make up what I describe as community benefits. So Swansea Council is part of a regional framework for appointing contractors, which tries to make use of small and medium local contractors, and part of that over the last probably 4 or 5 years, perhaps longer, has involved contractors making a contribution to local schools with active travel equipment such as cycle shelters, scooter pods where you can park your scooter, and active travel packs, which can include balance bikes, push bikes, scooters, and classroom resources for teachers as well. That's done on a rolling programme. The team that sort of manages that, they do work with schools which are usually in the adjoining area around schools. So it's always working with schools from the previous financial year, because it's when routes are completed. So I mean, some schools which were engaged in that at the minute include Bishopston Comprehensive and Primary, Glencoughlin, Penllygare Primary, Goss Island Primary, Cadler, Pontydilais, Biniago, Yunus Towie. Those are some of the primary schools that have had equipment. There's also, I think in the last year, 10 secondary schools that have been offered BMX display shows, which is just part of kind of a behaviour change and encouraging bike use. So that's some of the school engagement, but there are other features as well. This can include, depending on the scheme sometimes, for example, down in Swansea Canal, some diseased trees were sculpted by a local artist to create woodland animals, which has been a really positive attraction on that route for anybody who's gone walking or cycling up in that direction. There's also been at the link up to Ponce going from Groves End. There are accessible benches and interpretation boards about the local history. There's a Town Hill, the ravine route was there. There were some benches installed. Trees were planted on placement roads. I gather 240,000 bulbs planted on Cockett Road between Gorse Avenue and Broadway as well. There are also some placemaking features celebrating local heritage, which are being developed for areas such as the Havards, Gowerton, near Ponce de Lice, and also the Clinic area as well. So it's something which we do try and factor into routes which are done, and it's also something which the government is encouraging us to do more of, not just in terms of working with schools, but also creating routes which are attractive and enjoyable, particularly fitting in with the place efficiency priorities as well. So it's something that we've met with other officers and those teams, and we're trying to make sure we speak to each other more when we're developing schemes.
Okay, Wendy.
Well, yes, thank you. I'm afraid we seem to have missed out in my ward, don't we? As far as I can see, all we've done is lost several trees, but there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Mike White on core allocation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Hang on a minute, Mike. Sorry, but
Apologies, Chair. Pentlygate was mentioned in one of the community Pentlygate primary.
so Mike, carry on, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, my question is around co-allocation funding for minor works. It's part of the report in paragraph 6.2. You got the co-allocation funding that it would include minor works. That will enhance the whole network rather than any specific routes. Would you consider placing information signage boards on local places of interest along active travel routes across Swansea, which would support the council's tourism heritage objectives to promote places of interest to cyclists and walkers? Thank you, Chair.
Who wants that, Jack?
Thank you, Councillor White. So as I sort of mentioned in some of the introduction, the Active Travel Fund is primarily focused on purposeful journeys and commuter travel, if you will, for work, education, accessing services. While tourism and leisure are important parts of active travel, they recognise that it's not something that they lead with in terms of their priorities for funding. So as a bespoke core allocation package, I don't think it would be likely to get funding. However, kind of linked to what we were just talking about with community benefits, anything that helps make a purposeful journey more enjoyable and helps people see other potential destinations they can travel to is something that we can consider. And I think it's something that we can definitely talk about on a scheme by scheme basis if it's something which is along an active travel route. So it's something that we can pick up.
Okay, Mike.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I felt it would be sort of joined up in what we do in promoting the city county Swansea.
Yeah, I mean, in the interest of joined up thinking, and I think this is a cabinet level thing, I think really, I mean, active travel holidays is quite a big business. And, clearly the tourism department may well be trying to attract cyclists and walkers to the city. If we have this extensive route, which we've already heard evidence of, then that is an asset. And maybe we should be looking to the tourism department to try to get them to invest in this sort of thing on our routes, to try to encourage their use and to be able to promote the city as an active travel destination. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, Councillor White. If and all the more if it can be done within the terms of the placemaking of the grant for the community benefits. I think fully agree that if you're encouraging use of an active travel route to take you to a point of interest like the Liberty Stadium, for example, being one, I think that's only a positive myself. I know it's as has been mentioned, there's a lot of placemaking going on with the various interpretation boards and lots of things on the routes, which I think are really add value and local value to each of the routes myself. So
we'll put that in the letter to you as well, so you can pass that on to Robert Francis Davis as well. Jack, sorry, you want to come back in?
Sorry, Chair, just one really quick point to add to the end of that, just regarding tourism and travel and sort of linked up work. The council does work on that kind of areas. It just happens to be a different team because of the nature of the work. So the Countryside Access team does really good work out in Gower with cycle interest groups, looking at off-road cycling routes and creating a more identified network out there. So just thought I'd mention.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm also thinking of things like heritage routes up the Swansea Valley, for example, past White Rock, and you know, there's quite a few routes there which may well be of interest to people outside of Gower. You know, so it's worth mentioning that in there. Okay, Chris Holly, where's he gone? Over there, there he is. Put your mic on.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you, Chair. The capital grant is all well and good, and it does make them look, you know, the sites and the active travel routes look attractive. But the reality, they only look attractive for a certain length of time. Obviously, you know, with a capital allocation, there's no revenue, and the revenue consequences of repairs and upkeep. You may put trees, etc., and you may put benches, and you may have very good crossing points. But as time goes on, obviously, you know, the weather, which we're not blessed with the best weather in the world here, we can see deterioration in them. So my question really is, have we got any funding specifically for maintenance on these active travel paths? Because you just mentioned there's over 20 million, I think it's 20 million pounds worth has been spent on these. That's quite a considerable asset. So have we got a dedicated maintenance budget for it, or have we got to, you know, link that into the general roads budget and general highways budget, which is quite stretched, and you know, we need substantial investment in our roads as well. So it is a difficult one, and I'm wondering if you could give an answer to that.
Who wants this? Jack, Matt?
None of them, I don't think.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Councillor. No, it is something that we recognise as an issue. We want to create this wonderful network that links people together, and appreciate this does come with an extra burden for maintenance. It is worth mentioning, I guess, that in fact, several routes in Swansea are shared use paths, which are typically widened footways. So the maintenance burden won't be too dissimilar to how it was before, just in terms of the footways adjacent to the highway. But it is something that we raise to Transport for Wales, who are the funders, and Welsh Government. Every year it comes around when it comes with funding, and it's something that we're not alone with, alongside other local authorities too. There was a small budget for active travel network maintenance, which was in existence. That was actually handed over to Highways Maintenance in 2021 to help contribute to the maintenance of the network, and there's the other team that actually manages that. It's also worth mentioning that while the Active Travel Fund is a capital scheme, while schemes are on site, the teams do look at any localised improvements which can be made to help address issues in the network, which can maybe help address maintenance issues a bit longer term to contribute towards helping everything last as long as possible. And we've also in the past tried to bid for new maintenance equipment as a form of capital grant funding. So for the 22-23 financial year, there was a bid to include a small specialist street sweeper to help clear away cycle lanes. That wasn't accepted at the time by Transport for Wales, but it's something that we do continue to speak to them about, and we've had active discussions with colleagues in highways maintenance, but also parks and cleansing, about how we can work together to manage this as best as possible.
So how much did you hand over to highways from that active travel amount?
The very small budget that existed at the time was £24,000 per annum. That value was handed over to highway maintenance so that they could facilitate any requests that came in from members of the public to repair any assets on the network that issue had been reported on. I think importantly though, for our grant, whilst we can receive capital to renew a lot of the infrastructure that we have, one of the important aspects is that for a lot of the routes that we've delivered in recent years, we have actually put new infrastructure in where old existed, which is then removing the need for our capital maintenance, for our maintenance teams to go out then and repair those assets as we've improved what already exists in essence. So I think whilst of course, you know, the network is growing and there is a revenue burden there. We fully appreciate that as a team, and we try to push that with Welsh Government every year, as Jack has just said. But the message that comes back from Welsh Government is that they want the active travel network to be treated as part of the highway network, as part of the transport system. And so far we haven't been able to secure any commitment to ongoing revenue funding, but that's the same situation for all local authorities across Wales, and a view that's shared regionally when we meet with regional colleagues on the matters as well.
Yeah, I understand there's the same problem right across Wales. That's a given. The problem we have is in Swansea, and £24,000 for you know, maintenance is a considerably small budget, to be perfectly honest with you, considering how much it costs to actually have a drop curb put in. You know, that's you know, a couple of £1,000. So and you said, pardon?
3,500. Carry on.
Well, there we are, 3,500 for a drop curb. So 24,000 is not going to get you very far. The other issue that you said about shared use, it's become part of the highway, the footpath. But again, you know, there's signage, there's what have you, that has to be maintained, because obviously you know, that starts to wear out. So I'm quite concerned about the fact that, given that we have got all this this active travel area, this active travel routes, that we don't seem to understand the fact that it's going to have to be maintained. And I think that one of the things I will ask the chair to put in the letter is the fact that we are concerned that if they are, you know, if they are to be used, they should be safe, and if they are safe, they need to be maintained. And I think that is something maybe not purview for the people in the room at the moment, but I think it is important that we say that as a scrutiny board.
Okay, I think there's an advantage to the fact that most of these routes are new, so maintenance will get maybe more expensive as time goes on. Chloe, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the point you've raised about drop curbs. So I know that Jack had referenced the minor works packages that we have within our core allocation. And it's just important to note that within core allocation each year, we've got the ability to put together county-wide packages. So for example, this year we're looking at taking away barriers that exist. And that scheme was generated from direct stakeholder engagement, where groups, access groups, people with disabilities have identified areas on the network that required work so that they could so that we could maintain access for recumbent cycles, for example. And so that's a package of, I think, 27 locations that we're looking to make those improvements. But on the dropped crossings, for example, packages like that and smaller requests are still, whilst it's not a big capital scheme, we do still have the ability to potentially add those into the active travel programme as part of a core allocation package of works. So I think that whilst, you know, there is always the headline title pieces of active travel network that are being delivered, we do also have a lot of smaller packages which are facilitating those smaller, you know, localised improvements within communities. And, you know, referenced signage there, you know, we've spent an awful lot doing signage reviews in recent years and improving signage on routes as well. And again, that's something that we can revisit annually with our core allocation. So we do have the ability to address some of those acute issues as we go along through core allocation. Not all of them, but for some of the ones that you've identified there, that would certainly be something that we could look to fund through core allocation.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask, in terms of cleansing, I mean, I accept that where you've got the cycle routes on a main highway or adjacent to a pavement, then that will come under the council's cleansing regime. But if you actually have standalone cycle routes, for example, the Clyde Valley, Gower, are they included in the council's litter picks or cleansing regime, or is that going to have to be special schemes, special projects each time?
Generally, we'll make those requests as ad hoc.
Right.
So for the strategic network, we envisage that there's as high a cleansing and maintenance programme as possible in place for them, for National Cycle Network, for example, which we've got Route 43 and Route 4. But for any requests that come in from members of the public, generally they're ad hoc requests that will go across to cleansing, and they will respond accordingly.
Okay, so I think if we're going to keep developing this network, we are going to have to incorporate it into the general cleansing budgets and regime. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves snowed under with litter, aren't we? Along some of these routes. Yeah. Okay, we'll raise that, put that in the letter as well. That can be brought to attention. I know Cyril is watching this this meeting, so I'm sure he'll take that on board. Okay, back to Wendy for active travel objectives. Wendy.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. Yes, we're told, and I think it's been emphasised today, that the main objective of active travel is described as achieving a modal shift by displacing private car journeys with walking and cycling. Now, what evidence do we have to indicate if this is actually happening? Because I would say that if you come to my ward, and I'm sure it applies elsewhere across Swansea, if you come to my ward at school times in the morning, at school times in the afternoon, there is absolutely no evidence at all that people are forsaking their cars for bikes or walking. And indeed, the concern is that the cycle route is empty, and one resident emailed me to describe it as a white elephant of a multi-width, multi-textured roller coaster eyesore of unused space. So, you know, there are very strong views out there that we have something that is not being used for the purpose for which it was installed. So is there any evidence to the contrary? And I'm thinking in particular not of those lovely paths in more rural areas, and they I can fully appreciate would be used. I am thinking of these in urban areas where the temptation is, it seems, still to use a car in preference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. They love mixed metaphors up in Pembrokeshire, don't they?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, poetic here we are.
Poetic, yes. Andrew.
Yeah, could I just come in first before I pass the Jack to on the if any statistics are available. I just want to say is that I'm in the adjoining ward to Councillor Fitzgerald, and fully appreciate the concerns she's raising. I mean, she wouldn't be doing her job if she wasn't raising the concerns on behalf of her constituents along the road there. Yeah. But I have seen it used. You know, I travel that road quite frequently myself. I've seen it used by families. I've seen it used by perhaps inexperienced cyclists who are a bit wary about travelling on such a busy road as Gosainon Road, because we all know, and Councillor Fitzgerald has made it very clear that it is an extremely busy road. I've seen it used by mobility scooters, and it also links up to outstanding other off-road active travel links, in particular Gosainon to Kingsbridge, which will take you all the way down to Mumbles potentially, and also the Gosainon back to Ponderdylis to Coed Park. So it's seen as a key piece in the puzzle, if I have you. But I'll pass on to Jack if in terms of the question on the statistics.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I think just in terms of our monitoring, we've got a network of over 20 fixed cycle and now pedestrian as well counters, which are strategic locations around the network, not just in rural areas but also in the more built up areas as well. That helps us to record quantitative data, which is analysed by ourselves to inform our reporting duties, but also to build future business cases for active travel schemes. We also have access to temporary counters which can be deployed, and we can also use camera surveys, which our survey team can deliver for us if we're ever wanting to zoom in on a particular area or perhaps respond to any concerns raised in a particular spot. In terms of, I guess, noticeable uptake in active travel, like we can see trends from especially like pre-COVID to where we are now, where overall numbers were on the up. I mean, in terms of showing a modal shift, it is difficult to determine, as travel habits can take a long time to materialise. This is something that the Welsh Government has described as generational shift. Behavioural patterns, you know, they can be attributed to a bunch of different factors such as convenience, the weather, economic conditions, fuel prices, etc. But it's something where we're putting the network in, and then it's about the behaviour change that goes with it as well. Being able to have a joint of network which actually enables you to do a longer trip to go to the destination you need to get to, not just one small section of it which feels safe, is part of that in terms of joining up the network and making it longer. A really good example of that is for people who are living out in Bishopston, who will be able to, as soon as once Klein Common's been completed, cross over to join the rest of the network in around Swansea Bay. But there's obviously more to it than that. You know, we're working with schools, we're working on behaviour change as well to encourage people to feel confident in using a bike, but also confident in exploring their area and wanting to make use of the facilities as well. Just a note on, I'm sure if Councillor Fitzgerald's gone, if there's a note on the usage on routes, we did do some, with the survey team, some manual surveys out on the Mails Road area, and just as an example, over it was 10 different sort of blocks of time over many different days and different weathers, which doesn't let us stand out in the rain. There were an average of 4.5 cyclists an hour passed using the cycle facilities towards the bottom of Mails Road, compared to an average of 1.4 cyclists an hour who are on the main road. So I do appreciate that, you know, compared to motor traffic, it can feel like it's less busy, but I do believe that our facilities are being used by people, and in particular people who weren't confident to be on the main road with the cars before, which is really the target audience for a lot of what we do.
It'll be interesting to see, now that cyclists can go faster than cars in some areas, that well, that's going to have an impact. You know, many bikes might be able to do more than 20. We shall see. I'm actually going to go on to that, the monitoring thing, because that's referred to in paragraphs 8.2 and 8.3. Obviously, you said you monitor pedestrians as well as cyclists. I mean, that's the first thing. Obviously, I can see how you count a bike. I'm not quite sure how you count a pedestrian. And the second part is, can we actually see some of these statistics? Can we actually have a copy of the monitoring statistics so we can actually see for ourselves what routes are being used and how frequently?
So regarding pedestrian counts, up until recently, that's been done ad hoc. It's been done using camera surveys from members of the survey team physically counting people off as they go past a particular route. We've also got access to technology on CCTV around some parts of the highways network, which we can make use of too. I think I did make a reference to it. Over the last 12 months, we've retrofitted, I think it was just underneath 20 of the existing cycle counters to include pedestrian counts. So bicycles are counted with 2 tubes on the ground, pedestrians are now counted with an infrared little beam, so we can count who's who as they're going past. We also then increase the number of counters we have overall. So from now we'll begin to passively be counting pedestrian numbers, which will be really useful for ourselves and for informing bids. And then in terms of having access to statistics, of course, yeah, we can. Just in terms of perhaps outside this meeting, you can say which areas you're interested in. We can always work to do that, so that's fine.
Okay, so can we have copies of the statistics as well?
Yes.
Okay, lovely, great. I'm not sure, is Wendy still here? Because I think she has a question. No, okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to Adam then, and then we'll move back to on Francesca after that, yeah.
Can the cabinet member or any of his team tell us about plans for the next wave of active travel projects, and describe the decision-making process and what that will look like, and what public consultation on the next wave of projects might look like?
Andrew?
Yeah, no, I'll begin on this. So we have an active travel map that's been agreed with Welsh Government, and that determines the future routes that will be constructed, and then it's a bidding process forming a cabinet report in July. No, yeah. So, but and regarding the consultation process, as has been outlined today, we do feel that we've got a robust consultation process in place and continue. We'll be continuing with that process, but we're always looking for and accepting input from any other interested parties.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been touched on already, and I know the report and the legislation says that like tourism and recreation is very much like a secondary sort of priority. but I do think, and if it takes a car journey off and gets people walking, I do think it's just as important. So I don't necessarily think it's worthwhile saying that something like a tourism or a leisure journey is less worthwhile if a car would have been taken to use it previously. Also, that might spur somebody to do a bit more walking, and incorporate it into their commute, or if they're going shopping, something like that. And I know that you've said that you'll work with that the Swansea Council's Countryside Access team are working sort of alongside the active travel stuff. I do think it would be worthwhile sort of working together, because I do think there is a good story to tell in Swansea, especially regarding tourism, and I do think that they can supplement each other, and I do think it's worthwhile. I mean, in my ward in Lougher, we're sort of tourism adjacent, so I speak to residents who might walk to Llanelli on the paths that way, or might walk into Mumbles using the existing thing that we've got in the minute. These are journeys that would otherwise be made by car if they weren't there. So in future, I think the active travel that we've got going in is going to be in Pontycob Road and Culver Road. Anecdotally, that's not a route that a lot of residents in my ward are taking for their commute, but it is one that they will take to do recreational activities, whether that's in Gower or in Llanelli. So I do think that I do think it's worthwhile working together to supplement what's already existing. So I do hope in the future that'll be when the new bids are being made, that we can look at the gaps that can supplement commuting as well as leisure and tourism.
Yeah, Chloe.
That's okay.
Whilst we always look to work with as many internal stakeholders, including those who work in tourism, countryside access, within the Active Travel Fund grant, the parameters that we have, the grant objectives that are given to us each year, it's really important to distinguish that it is purposeful utility journeys that have to be facilitated on that infrastructure. And whilst as a secondary purpose, tourism and leisure might be facilitated on there, the main driver of and the business case that sits behind it has to be for utility journeys and to support people making a change in how they travel, and based on that purposeful journey, going to school, the shops or work, for example. The example of Pontycob Road, for example, that's part of National Cycle Network Route 4. It's a really strategic route, cross-boundary, and that's something that we work with regionally in terms of making sure we've got that connectivity. I just want to make it clear that when we've got access to funding, because it is a competitive process across Wales, we have to make sure that our business case is appropriate to the grant objectives that have been set against the grant by Welsh Government and Transport for Wales. Otherwise, it simply won't meet the grant criteria in order for it to be funded. And whilst we would like to be able to take those routes forward, crucially, it does rely on it being in what's defined as a built-up area. So places that do have more rurality, and this is also reflected in the grant allocations you'll see for some of the other authorities in Wales. The business case just doesn't stack up if they don't have as many built-up areas. For example, in Swansea, we do benefit from a really large urban conurbation, and there's an awful lot of routes that we can deliver as a result of that. But we'll always look to work with our internal stakeholders to identify where there are opportunities for us to improve access, for the reasons outlined there. But I just want to make it clear that there are very defined parameters in which we can apply for the grant funding that applies to the routes on the Active Travel Network map.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to agree, and I think you summed it up sort of better than how I was trying to say. I mean, we are lucky that we live in an area where I think there are a lot of areas that basically sort of cover the point, and that you've raised, as well as what I've raised, that there's sort of there's a lot of routes that will have dual purpose, and I hope that the team will be working with the stakeholders, as you said, to identify those areas that basically do cover the utility as set out in the legislation, but also will enhance the living experience of residents and visitors to Swansea. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Francesca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Jack for the report as well. I know I've been speaking to Jack recently, as probably you all know, that it's probably come into Mumbles from the Newton to Mumbles, so it's come at a really good time. So just a couple of questions, which I'll keep really brief, but one just observation on the tour side of things, which I know Mumbles Prom obviously isn't a sort of a direct or designated active travel route, but as ward councillors, and I know some of them along the Mumbles Prom have worked closely with Mumbles Development Trust to have sort of posters along the seafront of the history of Mumbles Railway. So, you know, I think it's up to all ward councillors, if it is coming to your area, to actively get involved and be proactive. We're now hiding nicely the graffiti on some of the walls behind it of the old pictures of Mumbles Railway. So there is ways that each of us can get involved and make it more attractive and more appealing. I hope people on bikes are not reading it, because otherwise they'll be steering off into the water. But those who are walking, hopefully it'll be of interest to them. So just an observation on that. Jack, it's probably more aimed at you, really. You know, obviously with Mumbles at the moment, we've had our consultation. Has any data sort of prior to any sort of moving it forward been gathered in terms of how many currently walk along that proposed route and cycle at the moment? Just because if it is going to go ahead, just so that we've got a comparison. Just wondering if any surveys have been done over the last few months or year.
Thanks, Councillor O'Brien. With the Newton to Mumbles Link scheme, which is one of our core allocation schemes, because that's at a slightly earlier stage of development, we haven't got, I believe we haven't got data for walking on that route just yet, but we are working through all of the routes which are either recently completed, but also some which are in development with the survey team to get data, because we need that for two purposes. One is our reporting for recently completed routes. We have to report for routes 3 years after they're completed, but also to inform future bids, of which that will be one of. So after the meeting today, I can check if we've gone to that area yet, but if not, we'll make sure that we have prior to bids next year. So.
Okay, amazing, thank you. Yeah, and if you just can keep us posted on that data. And I, same as what Chair mentioned, is that it would be interesting to see what the data was like for the other areas. Just to see what the comparison was like before and afterwards. Let me have a quick look. Also restrictions, you know, again, I'm going back to Mumbles Prom, really. I know we have quite a lot of issues with pedestrians walking and cyclists. Is there going to be like a restriction on sort of speed that they're going to be using? Because if it's a dual purpose, are there sort of speed restrictions for the bike? I know it may sound a bit silly, but is there any sort of restrictions on that?
This is quite a common theme that comes up in feedback, whether speaking generally or when you have individual complaints or incidents reported from members of the public. In shared use pathways in particular, which obviously the Prom is one of our most busy, you can have near misses with people, or you can have reports of somebody speeding possibly too close, or etc. There is no legal speed limit for cycling in the UK. There's not one which is enforceable. For example, I'm just saying e-bikes, I think get sold with a speed built in of 15.5 kilometers an hour, which typically is promoted as the maximum somebody should cycle at, although that is only suggestion and guidance. It's not something that's enforceable. It's something that would be really difficult to police. We've had lots of interactions with the police where they've been reporting particular incidents or particular pinch points or areas. The advice that I give to a resident if they are reporting an incident is, if somebody has made them feel unsafe, or if they've had an incident, or if they've been rude to them, etc., that they do need to report that matter with the police. That really is a matter for their enforcement. We do promote a Share with Care campaign on shared use paths, but across our network. We've recently refreshed the council web pages to include some more information about that. That encourages mindful behaviour of people sharing the path, not just from cyclists towards pedestrians, but also between different kinds of users, such as people with prams or people who use mobility aids, equestrian users, etc. So there's lots of different things to consider, but yeah, we appreciate it is an issue, particularly with the advent of e-bikes and e-scooters. Although e-scooters aren't legal on roads, we do see them out and about sometimes. It's something that we just continue to monitor, and if there are issues in particular pinch points, then we do try and do some monitoring there as well.
Okay, thank you. And I just got one last one, is that I know we touched upon that obviously some people are very much against sort of the active travel plan, and if if there is a community that is very much against, and maybe from the consultation it's been picked up that there's a lot of objections towards it, is that almost put to one side and it is going ahead regardless? How does the council weigh up that decision? I'm not saying I'm against it, obviously I'm quite into my sort of active, if I can walk to a meeting, I will certainly walk there, but I can also appreciate some people don't like perhaps the landscape changing around them. How does the council weigh up the options or their decision if there is strong objections to such a plan?
I think there's two sort of stages to this. One is I guess the in principle of routes being on the active travel network map, where routes are identified as, it might be that somebody that responses have said that somewhere needs to be improved. It might be some responses saying that an A to B between two areas would be beneficial. The stage after that is when active travel funding has been secured and proposals have been developed. So that's where we're asking residents, stakeholders, councillors, what their thoughts are on options or on more detailed proposals as they move along. So I think that it's a very difficult thing. I think actually the committee recognised this 2 years ago, that to balance different opinions of people where sometimes they may conflict between one another as well. Also between different user groups. I mentioned that we've set up an active travel stakeholder group because in the past there was I think it was called a cycle action progress meeting with cycle interest groups, which was all to the good, but you were hearing one side of the story and getting one set of feedback, and we wanted to make sure that we had a more holistic set of views and opinions from different user groups, including representatives of education, public health, disability, equestrian, etc. So that's something that we've worked on, and I think when you're asked where we do have schemes, something that we're always keen to do is obviously to engage with directly impacted or adjacent residences, local people, businesses, etc., and also to engage with the wider community, because a lot of the purpose of active travel is for people to travel through areas on longer journeys to try and replace those short to medium range car trips that people are taking, which it's very easy. As I live in Mumbles, it's very easy on a day like today to be like, oh, just jump in the car to go to Tesco's, but we're trying to encourage people to cycle. Now, that's just one example. I'm thinking of other places in Swansea as well. So we do try and broaden our engagement to be as wide as possible to make sure we're hearing everybody's perspectives as well. And we do also contact stakeholders and encourage written feedback as well. So it's something which we've been doing, say, we had some engagement down Blackpill earlier this year, just asking people what they thought the issues and the opportunities were. So we deliberately, with that consultation, didn't put any proposals underneath people's noses. We didn't have any plans. We just wanted to ask people what they thought was good or bad about their area and how they thought they could improve it. So some of those ideas are looking to influence the further proposals to come along. That you may obviously get people who continue to not be pleased with like what a proposal might be, but it's also the authority's responsibility to try and plan for more sustainable modes of travel and to make sure that we are able to provide for future generations as well. So it is a very difficult balancing act, and it's not one that we always get perfectly, but it's one that we always try and make sure that the feedback and opinions of local people do matter and are listened to and do influence the final proposals that make up our schemes.
Great, thank you. You'll be pleased. That's all I got to ask you, Jack, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for clarity, 15 kilometres per hour is about 9.5 miles an hour. Just for those who are still in old money. Yeah, Bowie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it's 15.5 miles per hour. For an electric bike.
15.5 miles.
Miles per hour.
We say kilometres.
Sorry. Just so you don't think it's 9 miles per hour, it's 15.5.
So it's almost a speed limit then.
That's the legislation that covers e-bikes.
Okay.
But obviously on a pedal cycle, somebody could cycle faster than that.
I can't focus now. No. Okay, Matthew, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we've, notwithstanding Councillor O'Brien, who's put a positive slant on today's meeting, I think. I think there's been a little bit of negativity in the room today, or out, off the room then on camera, predominantly coming from Councillor Fitzgerald. And I'm at a loss, to be honest, because, you know, the active travel route through Swansea and the ambition of the council and what Jack and his team are delivering, you know, I'm sorry, are outstanding. I'll give you an example of, you know, because people like to speak about their own ward. I like to try and look at Swansea as a whole, and I've travelled on a number of the routes that have been highlighted today, and I can't find a critique in them. I'll give you Ynys Road in Birch Grove, from Birch Grove to Ynysdowie, and I'm sure Jack's aware of that route. You know, we've turned a national speed limit country lane into what's a really safe stretch of road now for pedestrians and cyclists, for families and individuals to use. And surely that can't be a bad thing. It's joined up with other active travel routes that can now take me to Clydach or towards Morriston and further. Yeah, and I think, you know, I sometimes at a loss with the negativity surrounding it. I do take on Councillor Hawley's point about if we have got these routes, we need to maintain them, and we need to have funds to maintain them as well. So, you know, that is the key point, I think, about maybe some of the some of the doom and gloom that's been spoken about today. I think that is the shining light from it. Then, if I can take that we do need funds to maintain these routes, but we need just to keep on producing them and to keep joining stuff up. And as you said, it's a generational change to get people out of their vehicles and into their cars. And I think, you know, the cabinet member would agree that the team are working extremely hard on getting funding and to keep up the excellent work that's being done. Thank you, Chair. Of
course, the committee does reflect a wide diversity of views, Matthew, and people do, and all the questions that have been asked are valid questions. So, you know, I think we're trying not to be negative, we're trying to be constructive, and I think Wendy has been largely constructive in what, even though she may be sceptical about the outcome of it. And I see Wendy wants to come back as well. Wendy, you have to put your microphone on, Wendy.
Sorry, I'm having real problems. I lost the connection entirely for at least 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. I did hear the last point made, and what I will say here, I don't think anyone objects to cycle routes so long as they're in the right places. But running alongside people's homes and driveways, where residents are being forced to park on the opposite side of the road, where there is almost a fight to find a parking space, it does impact significantly on people's lives. And I think the council need to be far more aware that there are situations where active travel routes are not the best solution. So, you know, my experience is, it is one thing when you look at the broad picture, when you don't live alongside an active travel route. When you do live alongside an active travel route and you can no longer park on the road outside your house, your view is coloured. And then when you don't see it being used, that is another point of great annoyance. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Right, is there any more questions at all from anybody on this? Can I thank Andrew and the officers for coming along and answering the questions? It was very useful and very helpful, and we have tried to be constructive, and I think that will be reflected in the letter which we'll send to you, raising a number of points and seeking some clarification on various things. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, next item is item 7, which is the Scrutiny annual report. This is reflecting on the work that all of us have been doing of the previous municipal year, including the council survey and feedback from the Scrutiny meeting participants, and hopefully it will be presented to council on the 5th of October. So anybody got any points or questions they wish to make on this report, or anything you want to raise on it? No? Okay, can I therefore say that's been agreed? Thank you. Next item 8 is the membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. A number of changes in the report. The new public rights of way scrutiny working group is going to be up and running. Mike White is convenient. We have 10 councillors on that. The education performance panel, Fiona Gordon's come off and Sarah Keaton's gone on. Child and Family Services performance panel, Victoria Holland, Mark Tribe and Sandra Joy have joined that. And the Adult Services Performance Panel, Victoria Holland, Michael Locke and Mark Tribe have joined that. And we have the Customer Contact Working Group, which is also going to get up and running. Di Jenkins is coming on to that and Joe Hale is going to be convening that. So are we all happy with that report? Yeah, okay, thank you. So item 9 then is the Scrutiny Work Programme. Some couple of things just to highlight. The antisocial behaviour scrutiny inquiry is at final report stage, and we're hoping to have its report with its conclusions and recommendations in November, and then we'll hopefully be able to submit an inquiry report to Cabinet for decision. Just to remind people, there's a scrutiny training and development programs being developed. You all will have had an email asking you to sign up to these various sessions. Can I encourage you to do so? We can always learn from training. I've signed up to all of them. I think it's important that we do that. This is a new development for the council, and I think hopefully will help a lot of us improve our performance here, including myself, I have to say. And then as the committee work plan, 17th of October is the next meeting. We're going to be looking at the Swansea Public Services Board, and particularly their new Public Service Board Local Wellbeing Plan, which was published in May. And we're also going to be scrutinising the Oracle Fusion Project implementation report, which will be going to Cabinet 2 days later. So that effectively is a pre-decision scrutiny, looking at how that project has worked out and what the outcomes of it are, and particularly I think on the costs, which are quite excessive, quite large. Okay, anybody got any questions on the programme? No? In that case, item 10, date and time, upcoming scrutiny panel working group meetings for information. And as I said, the next meeting is on Tuesday, the 17th of October at 4 p.m. Can I thank you all for attending? I think we've had a very constructive and helpful meeting. So thank you very much indeed. And I will see you at the next meeting. Cheers. Thanks, everybody.